Go.
Great, thanks.
Now.
Cool.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome into the Schomburg Library. My name is Chris. I'm your Adult Programs Coordinator here at the library, and I'm so excited to be spending a wickedly good evening with you. I'll wait for laughs. I can see some of you out there, I don't know if this is intentional, repping some colors for Elphaba and Glinda, but since part 2 of Wicked comes out later this month, I figured what a fun time to learn about the entire journey of this story. Before I introduce our speaker this evening, just a few friendly library reminders. If you need a restroom during the presentation, those are going to be located straight out this exit door here. Ladies is immediately on the left. Gentlemen's is just a little bit further down the wall, and there is a water fountain in between if you need any hydration during the program. I'm also going to ask at this time if everybody could take a moment to silence all cell phones and any other electronic device that may make noise during the program. Sounds and lights emitted by those devices are distracting to your fellow patrons as well as the speaker. If anyone in the audience has questions this evening, I see a lot of familiar faces. You all know the drill. What I'm going to need is at the end is for you to throw your hand high up in the air. I have a mic. You do not. This mic, while it's not coming out of these speakers, it's going directly to our online audience. And so to make sure they can hear the questions you're asking, myself or one of my friendly volunteers in the back is going to bring a clip-on mic unclipped to you so that you can speak into that so our online audience will be able to hear whatever questions are on your mind. For our online audience, if you have questions, you know the drill. You're going to type in the Q&A any questions you may have. I'll make sure to field those to our speaker at the end of the presentation. Should I mention that's when we'll take questions, is at the end. If you're thinking of them as the program goes, don't worry, just throw them in the Q&A so you don't forget them later. You can also utilize the Q&A if you are experiencing any technical difficulties. That way I'll be able to go back and forth with you and hopefully fix whatever is troubling you on your end. Now, I've already taken up enough of your evening, so I'm going to turn things over to our speaker, Matt Boresi. We had Matt earlier this year, so I'm so excited to have him back, and I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a behind the scenes. So Matt did a program for our One Book, One Community earlier this year called Blue Viola. And as I was walking Matt out, I went, hey, could you create a program about the history of Wicked? And he went, yes. So this program was created for y'all. So this is unique for us. Hopefully you take it to other libraries and share this wonderful knowledge. But I thought just a cool little fact. Matt is an educator. He is a librettist. Did I say it right? Heck yes. And has written musicals as well. So everyone, a big round of applause for Matt Boresi.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, thanks for coming out tonight, and thanks for the welcome. I do write, there's one formal program, a Master of Fine Arts program at NYU for writing musical theater. And I went there and I kind of specialized in opera at the time, although I have written some musicals. And right now I'm writing a musical for the University of Illinois that is a musical about opera. And Stephen Schwartz did come and teach some of our classes when I was in grad school. And that was just before Wicked premiered. So really he was working on it at the time. So it's some birth of Wicked was really in the bloodstream as I was learning how to write musicals. So it is something that is very much of interest to me. So I'm gonna, as we talk about all the iterations of The Wizard of Oz over the past 125 years, I think why certain choices and adaptations were made is a particularly fascinating topic for me. So you're gonna hear some of my bias as a stage writer as we talk about choices that were made. I know there's a slew of people online right now, and they're not able to raise their hand. But I'd love to know how many of you, first of all, how many of you are casual musical theater fans? How many of you are hardcore musical theater fans? And how many of you are not musical theater fans? Okay. How many of you have read Gregory Maguire's Wicked book? Very nice, great. How many of you saw Wicked Part 1? And how many of you have seen Wicked, the stage show? Okay, great. And how many of you have seen the 1939 MGM Wizard of Oz? It would be very strange if you hadn't. It is allegedly the most watched film of all time. I don't know exactly how you get that metric. Certainly that was must-see watching from about 1956 to about I don't know when it kind of everything just splintered into internet things, but until about 2000, I think everybody in the country sat down once a year and watched The Wizard of Oz. So just enough of us from that era are alive, I guess, that it's still the most watched thing in the world. Who knows what it'll be? It'll be a 3-second video of Skibbity Toilet soon, but for now, it's still The Wizard of Oz. So let's talk about these iterations. And now I do have to, I like Wicked, I like the movie, so I'm on the side of all the things we're talking about. I love that book in the 90s, but certain things stick in my craw. And one is that part 1 of Wicked was formerly known as, it's not on this logo, Wicked Part 1. So the first movie was called Wicked Part 1, and the second movie naturally is called Wicked for Good. It keeps me up at night. Like, they couldn't have found a lyric hook for the first part, or called the second part Part 2. It's maddening, but such is life. So let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. I just saw the Sound of Music tour on Thursday night with my daughter. But we got to go back to 1900 and The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. And that's the name of the first book, is The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. It has subsequently been printed as The Wizard of Oz to parlay off the 1939 film. But his first book, the big one, is The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. And you can tell, like in that first slide, you saw Gregory Maguire's 1995 cover for Wicked. But if you're popular enough as a writer to get a TV or film version of your book, or a stage version of your book, the next printing, they changed the cover to an ad for the movie. And it's inevitably an uglier book cover. But I think you make so much more money as someone who's written a book that's been made into a movie than as someone who's written a book, that you probably don't mind the uglier cover. So it happened to L. Frank Baum as well, because subsequently that was often published as The Wizard of Oz. He wrote this in 1900, and it was the most popular children's book for 2 years, and then remained a huge part of the culture for decades. Lyman Frank Baum. Lyman was his father's brother's name. He hated that name, so he went by Frank. I kind of like Lyman Baum, especially if I was a, maybe it sounds like a candle scent, Lyman Baum. But Lyman Frank Baum was born in Chattanooga, not Chattanooga, Tennessee, but Chattanooga, New York. Largely, he came from money. He lived on an expansive estate there. I think his father had his iron in a lot of different business fires, and those fires ebbed and flowed, but they always lived on this estate. So you get a bit of a dilettante flavor to Frank Baum's life. Now, it's fascinating to look back at the life of an artist and try to psychoanalyze them. Now, I'm not a psychoanalyst, I'm a librettist, so I have no business trying to diagnose L. Frank Baum. But he really did so many things, and he was a traveling salesman. He raised chickens, like raised boutique breeds of chickens and wrote books about them. He sold fireworks. What did he do? He was a publisher, of course. He was an actor. He was a theatrical producer. And it may just be that dilettante thing. He came from money and he dabbled quite a bit. Maybe that's all it is. But when I look at his output, 13 sequels to The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, a spin-off series, 6 early readers. After he died, they handed the whole franchise to another set of people who wrote 40 more books set in his world. And the real L. Frank Baum heads like those first 40 books and call them does it say what they called them? The famous 40. So they actually acknowledge those as canon. I don't know how they can really be canon if L. Frank Baum didn't write them, but they call that canon. But he wrote, oh goodness, he wrote 200 short stories, 40 other novels, 36 stage scripts, and I just can't help but wonder if maybe he didn't have ADHD. Again, I'm not a doctor, but like the man could not stay focused on something, but when he went down a rabbit hole, he went all the way down the rabbit hole. So we'll never fully know. We can only look at, it's Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. We can't know where the particle is and how fast it's moving at the same time, but we can look at his output and go, I see a man who was restless, but very, very driven. And he's got some Chicago connections, and he lived in Chicago for a while. So we're going to talk about his Chicago connections tonight. Beautiful. His first 2 books that hit was a book of Mother Goose stories, and then he wrote some kind of fractured fairy tales that he called the Father Goose stories, and they were both illustrated by Maxfield Parrish. So those books got big, and they allowed him to quit his job as a traveling salesman, which he was very bad at, and focus on publishing. So his next work was The Wizard of Oz, which absolutely blew up. So he was a failing traveling salesman in Chicago when he was able to make The Wonderful Wizard of Oz happen. And Wicked is not the first stage adaptation of The Wizard of Oz. It is not the first mega blockbuster stage adaptation of The Wizard of Oz. The 1902 Wizard of Oz extravaganza was big money. I mean, this is one of the biggest shows of the first 10 years of the 20th century. And early for a musical, I mean, there were musical extravaganzas, but most of them are lost to us. I think the musical from that decade we're most familiar with, if you are a musical theater wonk, would be 1904's Little Johnny Jones by George M. Cohan. So if you've seen the movie Yankee Doodle Dandy with Jimmy Cagney, the production he puts on at the end with the big tap number, that's Little Johnny Jones. This is 2 years before Little Johnny Jones, so this is really a seminal American musical. It previewed in Chicago, the way the Notebook did, the way the Addams Family did, the way the producers did. It started right here in the Windy City, and then it moved to Broadway. It ran for about 10 months on Broadway. It came back to Chicago. It toured. It went back to Broadway, and it was touring or in Chicago or New York or both places at the same time until 1911. Big money. These two fellas, David C. Montgomery and Fred Stone, played the Tin Man and the Scarecrow, and they became really celebrities off of that. And so people were going to see that duo and those characters in particular. The Cowardly Lion looked more like a lion. Like, you can see it right there. There's somebody on its back, but it's a puppet. And it kind of just came out and made lion sounds for laughs and then went away again. So they shrunk that part down. And these guys were hot. Now, we want to talk about Fred Stone's Scarecrow, because it ties into the 1939 movie. But you can see it's quite different from the book, although it draws from that huge mythos of L. Frank Baum. And at some point, so we have, who do we have? Oh, there's no dog. They decided that it would be too hard to have a little dog on stage, a puppet. They didn't want a live dog. So Imogen the cow is Dorothy's sidekick, Imogen the cow. Dorothy was never called Dorothy Gale until this play, and then they put it in the books. So right there you see the Good Witch is a little more Elsa-like, and she freezes the poppy field, which you know from the 1939 movie, but that was actually created for this show and then ended up in the movie. So all these different iterations of The Wizard of Oz, like, they really ebb and flow. There's a character named King Pastoria who is the antagonist of this, and he appears in some of the Frank Baum books and in some of the Maguire sequels. So King Pastoria is in maybe the last one, Out of Oz, but appears here. And the Tin Man's name. So he's called Niccolo Chopper in this show, and he later in the books becomes Nick Chopper, and that name is in the Maguire books as well. But it came from this play first, and he played the piccolo. So it was Niccolo the piccolo player, who was a Tin Man, who was a woodsman, so he was Chopper. Shows at that time, I mean, copyright law was all over the place. You might know about the mania in the 1880s around HMS Pinafore and the Pirates of Penzance, where there were 14 different productions of HMS Pinafore playing within about 12 blocks of New York City, and they all had different songs because none of them were authorized. So they could just throw any old pop song into a production at the time. So there were dozens of writers on this play and dozens of songwriters, and they would try out songs, and just to see if the song was good enough to publish as sheet music, they'd do it like 3 times in a row, just keep encoring it to see if the people would sing along. So sometimes the show would run 4 hours long, which is, I mean, I guess you got your money worth if you're there for 4 hours, and people did like it. And Baum worked on the script and he had so much fun with political jokes. So they made all kinds of jokes to wink at the grown-ups in the audience. So lots of jokes about Teddy Roosevelt and jokes about, so how many of you have heard the idea that The Wizard of Oz was written as an allegory for the gold standard and for the monetary systems? I've grown up always thinking that this was true. So in preparation for tonight, I wanted to see where that came from and how true it was. And frankly, I cannot find any evidence that that's true. There was an essay written in 1964 by Henry Littlefield that said that the yellow brick road was about the gold standard and the silver slippers, because they weren't ruby until the movie. The silver slippers are about the silver standard, and the twisted yellow brick road is William Jennings Bryan's Cross of Gold speech. And the Emerald City is the greenback dollar that's not backed by gold, so it's empty. There's nobody behind the curtain because there's no backing of the currency. And this character is Teddy Roosevelt, and that character is William Jennings Bryan. I think the dude invented it for an essay in 1964, and everybody ran with it. I cannot find, and because Baum was fond of political jokes, and there were so many in this show, it's just stuck. And now it's in this sort of disinformation cascade, particularly on the web, where that's just true. And look me up if you find out that it is absolutely true, and that was Baum's intention. But I have not been able to independently confirm that. So here's our first Wizard of Oz musical, and it's a huge one. This one we probably don't need to talk a ton about because we probably all know about it. 1939, The Wizard of Oz, MGM's most expensive musical at the time, which is saying something because those blockbuster musicals cost a lot of money. Didn't make its money back until its 1949 re-release. So it was a hit, and it was a critical smash, but it actually cost so much it didn't make its money back for 10 years. So The Witch. So since we're talking about Wicked, the greenness of Elphaba and the Wicked Witch is so important. But Margaret Hamilton is really, Margaret Hamilton's green witchiness and the mole and the pointy nose, this movie is really where we get the green witch with the mole and the pointy nose and the black hat. Witches prior to that typically were red or orange. And the reason they made her green was because it really popped in 3-strip Technicolor. But poor Margaret Hamilton, this is Gail Sondergaard. And she was cast as the Wicked Witch at first. And she was a very glamorous actress, villainous always, but glamorous. Because they wanted initially the witch, does this look like anybody from fiction to you, particularly animated? Snow White's Queen, right? That's what they wanted the Wicked Witch to be, was Snow White's Queen, because that was big money like a year before. And they switched it up. Gail Sondergaard decided she didn't want to wear the nose, so she quit. So they brought in Margaret Hamilton, who tended to play crones and mean old ladies. But this was a copper-based makeup that was highly toxic. So she had to just drink, through a straw all the time. And so many people got really hurt on this movie. The scene where at the end of Munchkinland, where she goes poof and there's flames and she goes into the ground, the elevator got stuck and she got blown up. And it burned her hands and face because the copper in the makeup just melted to her face and they couldn't get the makeup off. And she was at home for 6 weeks recuperating, but she knew if she sued, she'd never work again because it was a studio city. So she went back on the picture. So they got, she had to go back and do the Surrender Dorothy scene on the broom, which had smoke coming out of a pipe on the broom. And she said, I'll come back and I won't sue, but no more fireworks. Forget it. So they got a stunt woman, and I want to give her credit because it's really kind of awful what happened to her. Betty Danko. That's Betty Danko up there. So they put her on the broom, they put the pipe on the broom for the smoke to come out, and the pipe exploded and she got blown up. And it made a gigantic gash in her leg, 6 weeks of recovery for her, all kinds of stitches. And so then they had a third, who's the third one? I looked up her name today. They got another stunt woman. She didn't get blown up. So she's, I don't know if she's okay now, but she was okay in 1939. So, and of course, I think we all know that Buddy Ebsen from the Beverly Hillbillies, he was cast as the Scarecrow, as the Tin Man, and he had toxic makeup. And the story that you always hear in the documentaries is he had an allergic reaction to the makeup. He didn't have an allergic reaction. It was poison. It would kill any of us. And he went home from the set one day, took a breath, and as he said, I tried to take a breath, and nothing happened. And he went and he was in the hospital for months. I mean, he really almost died. This wasn't like, oh no, it makes me sneeze. So that's when he got swapped out. No, they did. Not only did they change the makeup, but they they didn't tell Ray Bolger what happened to Buddy Ebsen. Yeah, they said, you know what, he had a little problem with the makeup and he's out now and you're in. And they switched the makeup without mentioning that the original makeup had been highly toxic.
You mean Jack Haley, right?
Jack Haley. They didn't tell Jack Haley. So the reason I said, oh, Burt Larson. The reason I mentioned Ray Bolger is that Ray Bolger was a huge fan of Fred Stone, the Scarecrow from the 1902 musical. So before he was cast, he called his agent and said, can I play the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz, because I loved Fred Stone in the 1902 version. And they said, no, you're the Tin Man. And so he was going to be the Tin Man. Buddy Ebsen, who was in fact also like a rubber leg tap dancer who did that like rubber bandy stuff like Fred Stone, got the part. When he went out, they moved Ray Bolger to the Scarecrow, and that's when Jack Haley came in as the Tin Man. So a little bit of shenanigans there. Up here, this is the illustration from Baum of the witch. Not green, one eye, telescopic eye, and 3 pigtails. That's her thing. Wow. So, but a big movie nonetheless, and we could talk about that for the whole hour, but we won't. We got to get to Schwartz. Okay, couple other adaptations. And I've got live links here, but I don't know that we're going to listen to them right now, but you can. I didn't know about this one until I was writing for tonight. Journey Back to Oz. Are any of you familiar with this? It's, this is, let me find the year on this. 1972, all-star cast, including Mickey Rooney as the Scarecrow, Danny Thomas as the Tin Woodsman, Milton Berle as the Cowardly Lion, Paul Lynde as Jack Pumpkinhead, Ethel Merman as Mombi the Wicked Witch, Risa Stevens as Glinda the Good Witch, Margaret Hamilton as Aunt Em, Paul Ford as Uncle Henry, Larry Storch from F Troop as Amos, and Mel Blanc as a crow. All the songs are by Sammy Cahn and Jimmy Van Heusen, who wrote just about every swinging 50s song for Frank Sinatra. And Dorothy was sung by Liza Minnelli, Judy Garland's daughter. Because here's the crazy thing. After all those things I just said, it seems like it's bad. I don't know if they just wrote it too fast, but like I sampled the songs and I'm like, these are fair to middling. But it was kind of a flop when it came out theatrically. They ran it. They created some interstitials with Bill Cosby as the wizard. So when he came back from commercial, he'd be like, I'm the Wizard of Oz, and he was in like a little balloon, and he'd cut to the cartoon. And then when the license ran out on the interstitials with Bill Cosby, they had Milton Berle film them again, even though he was a lion, as the Wizard of Oz. And so it ran for a while in the 70s in syndication, but it just hasn't stuck. I'm gonna watch, at some point this weekend, I'm gonna be watching this whole thing on YouTube. The whole thing's on YouTube. But I gather it's just not great. Yep. The Wiz, 1975, that got the Tony for best musical. They've made a film. What year is the movie? 1978. Sidney Lumet did the movie. Very expensive flop. Sidney Lumet was just not the guy for that, and they filmed it like this big MGM blockbuster, but it didn't really fit the vibe, so they spent a fortune. Nobody quite liked it. Diana Ross was kind of too old for the role. A marvelous cast, and moments from The Wiz are spectacular. The whole thing is a rough sit. Have you watched it lately? Watch numbers from it on YouTube and love it in your heart. But maybe don't sit down and watch the whole thing in a row. It's just too much of a muchness. Too much of a muchness. That's a line from Alice in Wonderland. Interesting thing about The Wiz, though, the director was Jeffrey Holder, and he won the Tony for directing and costumes. And I don't know if anybody's ever done that before. And you would know Jeffrey Holder as he played Punjab in the 70s movie version of Annie. Punjab is not in the stage version of Annie, but he's in that movie. But if you are of a certain age, you would remember Jeffrey Holder as crisp and clean, no caffeine, never had it, never will. He was the 7-Up spokesman in the 80s, Jeffrey Holder. But he directed The Wizard of Oz. 1985, Return to Oz. Anybody see that one? One thing that I got to go find a little, my daughter's just turned 14. I got to go find a tot and ask them if Wicked, the film, or Wicked for Good, is terrifying. Because I think what every iteration of The Wizard of Oz has is blood-curdling terror for children. And I don't know if the 1902 version was scary, but like we all have our version of The Wizard of Oz that just, or multiple versions, that just scares the bejesus out of us. And you have not tasted nightmare fuel until you've seen 1985's Return to Oz with Faruqa Balk as Dorothy. It's more true to the source material than just about any adaptation, and pulls from a whole bunch of the books. But Dorothy begins in a psychiatric hospital about to be given shock therapy because no one believes that she went to Oz. That's not in the Baum. She goes to Oz and meets Jack Pumpkinhead and the Gump and some characters that are in the books, TikTok, a little wind-up man. But she also meets Mombi, who is a witch that's in many of these adaptations. But this Mombi they mix up with another witch from Baum, who cuts the heads off of maidens and keeps them in a big trophy case and switches her heads out like hats. And at one point, Dorothy steals a potion from that witch, and all the heads wake up and just start screaming. So it's like a hall full of severed heads shouting at a little girl. This was for children. By Disney in 1985. They lost their shirts on this. This is when Disney was really, it was before like The Little Mermaid brought Disney back. So this is like the Black Cauldron, the Rescuers Down Under. This is like the nadir of the Disney experience, and this was no exception. That's dark. And The Wiz has, oh my gosh, there's these guys in the sewer, because they set it in in the subway. And they're little springy guys, and they grow up really big, and there's this little sound that they make when they, and my wife grew up as a The Wiz fan. And if I just come up behind her in the dark and go, doo-dee-doo-dee-doo, she'll just start screaming bloody murder, because The Wiz is also just a little too scary. So there's the, but I think that nightmare fuel aspect of it might be what makes it stick for all of us. We can't let go of these adaptations because they stuck, because they hurt us just a little bit. This is my wife and daughter. Now I'm just showing off, but this was Halloween, I think 2 years ago. So I said my wife was a The Wiz fan. That's the Diana Ross costume, and there's my daughter as Judy Garland, and they're competing stuffed Totos. So just had to throw that one in. Here we are, Wicked, 2003. Nope, read the book, 1995. Maguire, interesting guy. Now, what's that make him back then? Younger than that, about 30 years younger than that, right? There's his husband right there. His husband's a painter. They actually had one of the first gay marriages in the state of Massachusetts. There are their children, 2 from Cambodia and 1 from Guatemala. And he's a very Catholic man, and the Catholicism actually plays into the inception of the book Wicked, so it's worth mentioning. As does, I think, it's worth mentioning that he's a gay man, because The Wizard of Oz has traditionally, I don't think in Baum's era, but from 1939 on, has been a very iconic gay property. Now, why? Largely because of Judy Garland being a gay icon. Why is Judy Garland a gay icon? When I look it up, the books say that the gay community at that time saw her struggles and also her string of gay husbands as something that they could relate to. Other theories are that the way the piece goes from black and white to popping into color has a certain resonance with like embracing one's true self. I don't know that we'll ever get the answer to that. At some point it just becomes a gay thing, so it continues to be a gay thing, right? But Wicked is no exception. There are characters that are bisexual, that are homosexual, that are pansexual in the book, and it just rumbles along there. That's just the the world. All those sexualities just exist in that world pretty casually. Book's a big hit. He wrote it, so he had already written. He does these. After Wicked, he did Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister. I don't know if you read that one. That's the stepsisters from Cinderella. He did Mirror, Mirror, which is Snow White. And then I think you just have to kind of return to where the money is. And he did about 3 more Wicked books, which we'll talk about in just a second. You like them? Those books? Yeah, I like them.
I've read all of them, but I don't know anyone else who's read all of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What do you think about the subsequent books? Do you feel like they kept the quality level up?
I liked all of them, but I didn't like the last two. I didn't like the Alphaba one.
And the lion one?
And the last of the Marakar series.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the ending was pushed, but I've always enjoyed all of them.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really the fact that he has this expansive, the kids call it lore now, but mythos, is in keeping with Baum. Baum's world got bigger and bigger, and all these novels, and the maps kept expanding, and the lore kept expanding, and so it really feels of a piece with the source material for Maguire to have written a very big world. If you don't like big inhabited worlds.
Have you ever Baum books?
Sorry, what's that?
Have you ever read the
I've read a few, yeah, and they're pretty consistent, actually. I mean, well, I haven't read the like minor ones. I've read I've read the Ozma of Oz and golly, what, the Land of Oz, the TikTok one, yeah, and they're pretty darn good. You know, Baum knew which side his bread was buttered on too, and he started to take lore from non-Oz books that he'd written and pull them into the Oz world and add them to the map so he could like monetize those books. So clever guy. But Maguire said, as a Catholic, he frequently meditated on the nature of evil and nature versus nurture. And what would happen if you were continuously told that you were evil? What would that do to you after a time? Would you embrace it and say, here's the evil you were looking for? Or would you continue to fight it? Also with witches, you never know with authors how much they retroactively apply this to the truth, but he said that like growing up fond of nuns, he saw cloistered women in a semi-mystical setting with a habit, who were stigmatized, but he found them warm and interesting and whole people, and scholars. And so something about the way we think of witches and the way we stigmatize them reminds him of the way we stigmatize nuns, who he's fond of. So he thought, what if, I love these nuns and people talk trash about these nuns, and that seems to lend itself to Alphaba, if that is in fact the order of gestation there. And if you look at the era that these are coming out, he became very concerned with images from Abu Ghraib, with the propaganda that surrounded the Gulf Wars. And so when you look at Madame Morable's poems that she writes, he says that at some point he saw some articles very blithely comparing Saddam Hussein to Hitler. And he didn't say he disagrees with that, but he said, I see how that works. You go, Hitler, right? You don't like Hitler, do you? This guy's Hitler. And you go, okay, well, I don't like that guy. And he thought, oh, okay, so that's how propaganda works. And so he puts that into the story of like, if I can demonize these folks over here, and if I can compare them to something they don't like, that can be effective, and I can do it through art. So a lot of what he saw in the late 90s and the first decade of the 20th century, some of the darker things that were happening in US politics found their way into the story. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it's true, but I read that when he was writing Wicked, he wanted to give a nod out to L. Frank Baum, and that's where he came up with the name Alphaba.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. And I think that I think we could probably unpack those all day. I can't, but I think there's a lot of Easter eggs in there. And there's a lot of Easter eggs in the score to Wicked. There's a lot of spots where Schwartz has like inverted a melody from the MGM and stuck it in. Like everyone seems to have fun, because the lore is so rich with that. But Alphaba is L. Frank Baum. So now we go to the musical version of this. Oh, here's the sequels. Son of a Witch, Lion Among Men, Out of Oz, and there's some other ancillary media out of it as well. But Out of Oz does kind of allegedly wraps it up. We'll see.
The next series has 3 books, and then there's the prequel.
Ooh, what's the prequels?
Well, the prequel is just called Alpha.
Oh, okay. All right.
And the next one. Yeah, the next one is the Marakor series, which follows. So Alphaba's granddaughter ends Out of Oz sort of just on her broom, and then it continues her in this entirely new world.
So she doesn't go back to our world. She ends up somewhere else entirely?
Not for the first 2 books.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, she does not. She ends up in the world of Marakar.
Okay. I don't know if Marakar is from the Baum. It probably is, because it's a big world, and Maguire almost always draws from. He's not just inventing anything out of whole cloth. in a good way. But Baum had a deadly enchanted desert around Oz, but then he put many of his other mystical kingdoms on the outside of that desert. At one point, not unlike how at one point Sir Arthur Conan Doyle tried to wrap up Sherlock Holmes, and he had Holmes and Moriarty fall off Reichenbach Falls, and he said, well, that's it, I'm tired of writing that. And then, then he needed to, pay for a new house, and suddenly Sherlock Holmes was back. Baum did the same thing. At one point he said, and a magical spell fell all around Oz, so it was invisible forever, and nobody could ever go there again, the end. And then his publisher said, you sure about that? He said, no, I'm not. And he put more. So tonight I'm going to see if Marikar is a name from one of those ancillary kingdoms, but that's fast. And you like those?
I did like that series. And there's a title for it. It's like the New Beginning series or something. They marketed it, branded it.
Huh. What am I doing? Making a mess. The Wicked the musical's full title is this: Wicked, the Untold Story of the Witches of Oz. Might make this go away. I did. I don't know. Here's Stephen Schwartz, the composer, lyricist, and his toupee. This man, by 2012, between the three of them, Maguire, Holtzman, and Schwartz had made $104 million off of Wicked, and that was before the movies came out. So you think he could get a better toupee, but I don't know. Universal already had the rights in the early 2000s they were going to make a film. Schwartz read Maguire's book, wanted to make it into a musical, called Universal and begged them, can you please give me the stage rights first? And if it's a big hit, you won't mind. And if it's a flop, you can make your movie after. And I can't believe it, but they said yes. And the reason I can't believe it is because Schwartz, if you look, this is what really shocks me. You talk about, if you're wondering if there's any second acts in life, when I thought of Stephen Schwartz in the early 2000s, I thought of him as a minor Broadway writer because his biggest works were Pippin and Godspell, both of which aren't that famous and aren't that good. I mean, I like all musicals, so I like them, but like if Fosse hadn't worked on Pippin, you would never have heard of Pippin, right? By the 90s, they were letting him write lyrics with Alan Menken to a lot of these Disney shows. So he certainly was well employed, right? Oh, he also wrote Doug Henning's The Magic Show on Broadway. So like, this is a second string Broadway writer. Now, second string Broadway writer, which is no small beer. But the idea that the guy who wrote Godspell would in 2003 become the richest man on Broadway and would write a movie that is now the most watched film, no, not the most watched, the highest grossing, because tickets cost more now, the highest grossing musical film of all time, would be the guy who wrote Pippin? I never would have guessed it, never would have guessed it. And Winnie Holtzman never had a Broadway show until Wicked. She was largely known as the writer for My Soul Called Life and 30-something, if you remember 30-something. But it's these words right here. I think that is the secret sauce to Wicked. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But fourth longest running musical, second highest grossing. Care to guess the top three longest running musicals?
I know, but
go for it.
Phantom of the Opera.
That's one.
Phantom of the Opera. Lion King.
Yep.
Wicked.
Yep.
I don't know number 4.
4 is, wait, this is fourth. Still Cats. It's been closed for a long time, but it ran for a really long time. Yep. Chorus line's kind of fallen down a little bit below, and pretty soon the Chicago revival. What's that?
Repeat the fourth for online.
Sure, they are, and I have them. What are we on? Okay, Phantom, 1988 to 2023. That's the longest running. Chicago, the revival, 1996 to now. That's number 2. Lion King, 1997 now. Then Wicked, then Cats, 1982 to 2000. So, austere company. So what, and it didn't win Best Musical in 2003. Do you know what did?
Avenue Q.
Avenue Q, which is satirical version of Sesame Street, very funny, very good. Frankly, a little smarter than Wicked. I mean, Wicked contains the lyric, like a seed dropped by a sky bird, and you left a handprint on my heart. I mean, there's some execrable material within Wicked. Avenue Q is very well crafted, but it's dirty, and it's political, and it's just not for everybody, and it's not gonna ever be the highest grossing musical film of all time, right? Why did it win the Tony over Wicked? I mean, I was at like an industry party at the time, and everybody's teeth dropped out that Wicked didn't win. But the late great Margot Lyon, who produced Hairspray on Broadway, won the Tony for producing Hairspray, she said, don't get it twisted that any industry's awards are in any way meritocratic. And this is a woman who got the Tony. She said, first of all, the awards are an advertising mechanism for the industry. And two, the voters have a stake. The voters are in the industry, and they have a stake in who wins. And a lot of them have a stake in what's going to tour. So, and this doesn't map every year. You can't take this heuristic and apply it to every year of musicals. But the fact is, Wicked was gonna print money no matter what. Avenue Q needed the Tony to juice the tours. So the word on the street is that the folks who were invested in tours going well said, Wicked's just fine. Let's juice Avenue Q. There's also personalities. I don't know if Stephen Schwartz is well-liked or not. I will say he's the only celebrity I've actually heard use the words, don't you know who I am, to an usher or a waiter. So, take that with what you will. But, so we've got Maguire's Wicked. Very dark, very political, still has humor in it, but it's black humor. Quite adult, very rich lore. Frankly, that's a lot for a musical. Songs take a long time to sing. A musical needs to be fairly simple to go over. That's not an insult, but there's a lot of things a musical has to do. So it can't be overly complicated or it'll just never end, frankly. So if you want it to be 2.5 hours, right? You've got to have a pretty tight set of characters and a pretty tight set of happenstance, because every song is going to be 5 minutes and you got to have like, a couple dozen of those. What's the big difference? The Glinda-Elphaba relationship, which is so core not only to the story and the property and the score of Wicked and to the film, but to its appeal, is really cranked up by a woman who wrote one of the most legendarily effective cult pieces of teen anxiety dramedy on television, which was this short-running show called My So-Called Life that spawned a million other shows. So by saying the core of this is about kind of a gloomy goth chick and kind of a perky preppy chick and how they don't like each other, if that's at the core of this, that's gonna play. And does it ever play? And the fact, we are a species that really enjoys simple, even overly simple classification systems. They're fun. Horoscopes are fun. I'm a Taurus, I'm this, Which Golden Girl are you? Which Sex and the City character are you? What are the ones we like to use? Even the corporate ones. I'm an extroverted, inverted, perverted, like the Myers-Briggs test, right? We love running ourselves through that game. So are you a Glinda or are you an Elphaba? Are you going to wear pink to the premiere or green to the premiere? I don't think we can understate how important that is and how resonant the relationship between these two characters is to young people in particular. And I have to say, bless Wicked for doing that. Because what we need, we being the musical theater industry, every few years is something's got to pierce the public consciousness. There's always going to be super hardcore musical theater geeks who are going to say, oh my gosh, have you seen Ride the Cyclone? Have you seen, right? But if we don't break into popular culture every few years, it's going to die on the vine. Because, and of all the forms of theater, all of which are in the tank since the housing crisis and since COVID, commercial musical theater is the most financially solid. But it's delicate because it's expensive to see shows. It's expensive to put them on. It's expensive to go park. It's expensive to get the ticket, right? And what we have nowadays, and it's why you see so many immersive theater experiences, and that Phantom's getting a revival in New York right now, immersive. You go into a big mansion and they give you a mask and you put it on and you're at the opera house and you're at the masquerade ball and Phantom happens all around you. Because to sit and watch something through a rectangle, well, you know what? I got a 70-inch rectangle in my 4D HDK 5000 in my living room. I've got a very comfortable couch with drink holders. My whole kitchen is right there. I got surround sound, and so does everybody else. And now TV isn't like game shows and soap opera. It's like A-list stars and A-list writers on prestige dramas, right? So what's going to bring us to the theater? And that's why you're seeing these tendencies in immersive. So theater's a very delicate animal in this new technological paradigm that we're living in. So what do we need? I mean, there was a time, the biggest selling record of 1967 was My Fair Lady soundtrack, right? More so than a Beatles album, more so, right? Everybody had the My Fair Lady album, you know, with the Hirschfeld drawing on the front, right? Everybody had that. That was, musical theater was popular culture from 1902-ish, 1904-ish, right? All the way into the 60s. That's where we got our songs, that's where we got our celebrities. TV ate that, film ate that, video games ate that, TikTok ate that. So what, and we see fewer and fewer musicals become on everybody's lips. It's not like, I mean, Guys and Dolls and, you know, Music Man and West Side Story were the same year. Hello Dolly, everybody knew Hello Dolly in the 60s. Fiddler on the Roof in the 60s. Well, then you get to Hair and Jesus Christ Superstar, and this happens. What's on the radio and what's on the stage are two different things. So if you go since then, okay, you got those rock shows. What's big in the 70s? Well, Evita, Annie, those got movies made. Everybody kind of knew those. You can picture the commercial in your head, right? The 80s, people weren't really seeing Sondheim back then. He got a lot more famous since, right? People didn't really see Sweeney Todd or A Little Night Music the first time around. Cats, okay, Cats was a big one. What's a big one? The 80s is really bad. AIDS and crime in New York really, really messed up musical theater. If you couldn't go to New York safely to see it, and if some of the greatest creators like Michael Bennett, The Chorus Line, 1975, if they've died, there's a lot of real bad shows, frankly. The mega musical, 1987-88, Phantom of the Opera, Les Mis, Miss Saigon, now we're back. Everybody's seeing those. Accountants are seeing those. You know, like jocks are seeing those, like for birthdays, for anniversaries, right, for Christmas. The whole family's going to see those. We're back, baby. Oh, what after that? Gee golly, 90s, not so great. 1996, Rent. Hey, okay, Rent. I got Rent. I'm at Best Buy the day it came out, buy the double CD, stick them in the car, listen to it 2,000 times until I knew every word, right? Everybody from our class, Elsa, knew every word to Rent. Cover of Newsweek, the cast of Rent. We need that. Next one, Legally Blonde, 1999. They play it, they have an MTV game show to pick the next Elle Woods, and then they do the show. That one breaches the public consciousness. Next one, this one. Right? Hamilton, right? Hamilton, you go to Whole Foods and there's the CD of Hamilton in the checkout lane, right? That's good. We want that. We want Beyonce and President Obama to go to Hamilton.
I'd say the two you're missing are the producers and Book of Mormon in terms of those.
Yeah, and Book of Mormon's creeping up on one of the biggest money, longest running ones as well. Spamalot was big. Producers was humongous. I mean, you couldn't get a ticket to. The only funny thing about the Producers is that after Nathan Lane and Ferris Bueller left it, they had, thank you, Matthew Broderick, they had trouble keeping up that. Surprisingly, they had a little bit more to do with that show than the actual producers would have liked there. So we need a Wicked if we're going to keep having musicals. And nothing blew my mind like, as a musical theater writer, than walking into Target last year and seeing Legos of a musical. Legos of a musical. There were no Rent Legos. And this is very, very good news for all of us. And what's even better news for all of us is this one. So my daughter was 12 or 13, perfect, dressed up with her friend. We all go to see Wicked. By the end of that 2 hour and 40 minutes, they weren't watching the movie anymore. They were bored to tears, which was suboptimal, right? They'll be first in line for the second one. They'll probably be bored to tears by the end. So why were they bored? It was certainly well made, beautifully cast. When they said that Ariana Grande was going to be in it, I thought she'd be playing Elphaba, because she actually has a monster belt, and grew up on Broadway. When she was 13, she was in the musical 13 on Broadway, right? And she has a big, husky Christina Aguilera belt when she wants to. Now, you really can't sing it much better than Cynthia Erivo. It doesn't, like, sounds don't really come out of a human much better than that. So I don't think she can, toe-to-toe with her. This casting is correct. And just sort of, the vibes are right there. My wife is a rather renowned musical theater voice teacher, professor at Northwestern. She got a call from Vogue magazine last year, and they said, hey, there's a controversy about Ariana Grande's voice. Can we ask you about it? And she said, yes, you can. And they said, she's talking in a fake voice in interviews, and TikTok is mad about it. And so my wife looked at the videos, and Ariana Grande had been on some children's sitcoms on Nickelodeon where she played a ditzy character and she spoke off the voice like this. And it was creeping into that territory in the press junkets with Cynthia Erivo. So the question was, is she an insincere person? Is her voice shot? Why is she talking in this head voice? And my wife's response, which she can't say with 100% certainty, but they sang live on the set with the show. They were filming the second one. She made an album in a break of the filming, and a press junket, you talk nonstop for a week in a hotel room. So her assumption, because Ariana Grande is very skilled at using her voice and has the greatest coaches in the world, is that she was not speaking on the thick folds, right? She wasn't here where you can kind of feel your voice doing stuff in your throat. She floated it a little bit to save it, is probably what was going on there. But they wouldn't let these two ladies rest. Somebody online didn't like that this poster didn't look like this poster. And frankly, this is a much better poster, much more stylized. But when you got movie stars, you want to show their faces. So they photoshopped it here. Cynthia Erivo saw the Photoshop and kind of had a fit on her social media and said, this is erasure, you're erasing me, I worked so hard. She has since said, I overreacted, I probably should have just called a friend and bitched to a friend instead of freaking out online because I got made into the bad guy about it. And it was a bad look. I saw her say that, and I went, that's a little prima donna, don't like it so much. But the fact is, they were so overexposed last year, they couldn't win. Anything they said in an interview, everybody was all over it. I'm very sorry to say it really does look like Ariana Grande has a terrible eating disorder and is going to die in front of our eyes like Karen Carpenter, and I don't like that one bit. She doesn't like the scrutiny that she's under about her weight. I'm a dad and I don't like her weight, but such is life. Oh, look, the Legos. We need more of this. The first act is 90 minutes. They made it into a 2 hour and 40-minute movie. Can any of you, can you tell I teach? Can any of you tell me other big franchise IP in the past 10 or so years that have taken one book and split it into two movies?
Oh, I thought you meant The Hobbit.
The Hobbit is the shortest book, got split into 3 movies, 3 long movies. What else?
Harry Potter.
Last Harry Potter, 2 movies. The first one was just Harry Potter and the Tent of Screaming. And the second one had the whole war. Yeah.
Twilight.
Last Twilight. Breaking Dawn. Did they break a Narnia into? They may have It. They broke It into 2. Why? Exactly. Because it's an IP that people are going to see no matter what. Intellectual property. And this is the unfortunate truth about entertainment these days is that these big companies they IP farm. They look for intellectual property that they can purchase and continue to print money off of for decades. Disney buys Star Wars, and you can make a Star Wars movie every year and 6 TV shows, comic books and toys and Legos for forever. It becomes content because these are public companies that need to show a profit every year, and what are they doing for their shareholders, right? It's bad for art. It's big money. So 2 Wicked movies are going to make twice the money as one Wicked movie, and it doesn't matter if it makes both movies worse. The same people are going to see both of them whether they liked it or not. So this is just where we are. Now, Stephen Schwartz, he has to say this, but he said, look, I don't know how you come back from Defying Gravity. There's no intermission at a movie. I kind of like movies that do have an intermission, but there's no intermission. So he's like, after Defying Gravity, you're wrung out. What, you're going to go have a boring scene for a while? Everybody's going to want popcorn. And frankly, once we've added visuals to this, the movie's going to be a little too long, so let's cut it in half. I don't know if I agree. Thomas Meehan, who wrote the book for the producers, and Annie, he spoke to my book writing class, and he said, you shouldn't go more than 3 minutes in a musical before somebody sings or dances. That's very tight and very old-fashioned, but I like it. I like his moxie, right? 3 minutes and you go. There were times in Wicked Part 1 that you'd go 3 minutes inside of a song before they got to the next verse, and the song would start, and my wife would go, we're still in Dancing Through Life? Because they'd like throw books at each other for 3 minutes, and then they'd be back in the song, and you go, oh, you're straight, you really want 2 movies out of this. But it's, some of it's necessary, you want the spectacle, and if you watch, you can look at plenty of supercuts on YouTube of the stage version in which Elphaba goes up on a cherry picker and sings the last note in a rain light. And then you look at 7 minutes of CGI Elphaba quidditching around a castle in the sky while singing riffs, and you go, oh yeah, you can't just have the stage version. You gotta blow it up a little bit, right? So that's gonna necessarily stretch things. But boy, they do go on. What's left? Oh, here's that title card, Wicked Part 1. That's an homage to The Wizard of Oz, although they had to be very careful not to use ruby slippers, because you got to pay for that. You can't, they have their own witch color called Cynthia Green, because if you match, MGM's got the rights to their witch green. So they had to come up with a new witch green. They also wanted that green to look like skin and not like paint. If you remember Darth Maul from Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, he's supposed to be a red and black guy, but he looks like a guy with red and black paint on him. He looks like if you went like this, it would come off on your hand. And so they worked very hard to make Cynthia Erivo look green and not covered in green paint. There's our girls from 2003, Elsa herself, Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth doing a little cameo in the piece. There's Winnie Holtzman, the book writer, who also wrote the script for the movie, doing a cameo in the piece in that scene. And here's Stephen Schwartz. His toupee did not get to make a cameo because he's wearing a hat, playing the sort of the who rang that bell guy from Wizard of Oz. But even the architecture of Oz, they had to look very carefully to make sure that it didn't rip off MGM. They couldn't have a swirly yellow brick road. That's trademarked by MGM. So they really did have to mind their P's, and they had a whole team of lawyers just going, okay, we're good, yeah. Up, there we go, the end. You'll be changed for good. So y'all gonna be there opening night? You ready for it? Feeling good about it? You know, all the good songs are in Act 1. All right. Well, friends, thank you very much for a wonderful evening. Chris, how are we doing? Can I take any questions, or is everybody got to go away?
We have a couple ones, we'll probably go a smidgen over, but we can do a couple questions. I don't have a, hold on, give me 2 seconds to try on, then people can hear what I'm about to say.
If any of my online friends have any questions, you can submit those using the Q&A. If any of my friends in the room have a question, you might have noticed my friend Julie running around with a microphone. Raise your hand high in the air. Julie's going to come to you so that our online patrons can hear your questions. Anyone have any questions?
Yes?
When you're talking about scary things in the movie, you didn't mention the dragon that comes out in the first act of Wicked. I didn't get to almost not see the play because my 5-year-old granddaughter, who was sitting next to me, took a flying leap into my lap and said, "I want to go home."
Yeah, big puppet comes all the way out, yeah.
And we were eye level with it. So, yeah.
A lot.
Almost as bad as the monkeys.
If I can just quickly piggyback on that, I've always wondered what people who haven't read the books make of the time dragon in the musical, because they don't do anything with it. It's a big part of the books.
And what's the puppet company, the clock plays a huge part in particularly Lion Among Men. But I don't know, there's those, I mean, it's so prominent on stage, and I can only assume that the designers were married to it, and it stuck around, and it gives it some whiz-bang, you know, the spectacle's always a big part of it. But yeah, it's just there for, you know, shock and awe.
Question. I can't tell you how old I was before I realized that the Oz people and the Kansas people were the same. Anybody else?
The what?
The Kansas people and the Oz people were the same?
Well, you
I
know,
was old.
MGM didn't think that people would accept it as a fantasy. They thought if we don't ground it in reality and make it a dream sequence, people will say, to heck with this, like, fantasy nonsense. Really, no other version has that as a hallucination. Like, she literally goes to Oz and does or does not come back from Oz. But the idea of it as a hallucination was MGM's meddling.
I was a teenager before I figured it out.
There's a version of the script where she and, I can't remember his name. What's the Scarecrow's name when he's a guy in Kansas? Hank. They're a little flirty, and he's supposed to go off to college. Hank, the farmhand, is secretly brainy, and he's like, "Well, Dorothy, I'm going off to college." And she said, and he's like, "Write me." And he's like, "I will." And that's why there's a line, we call this draft dissonance, when there's a vestigial part of a previous draft in a script, when she says, "And I'll miss you most of all, Scarecrow." And you're like, well, that was really pooping all over the other characters. It's because there was going to be a light romance plot line there that got cut, and that line stayed. So next time you see it, you hear that line, you'll be all creeped out.
Interesting.
Anything else? Anything from the
Looks like we
Peanut
got
Gallery?
one online.
Mr. and Mrs. America and all the folks at home?
I think this is a comment about like the top musicals, like when we did that list. They said they didn't hear The Sound of Music mentioned, but that is still going strong. But you were talking, because that's not currently running.
Yeah, I mean, there's a tour in town right now. It's lovely. It was great to see, an equity live production of Sound of Music with my daughter, because that's such a sort of a musical theater sacrament. But we're talking about continuously running specifically on Broadway. Mm-hmm.
Well, if there are no other questions, then Matt, thank you so much for joining us this evening and sharing your knowledge. And everyone have a great rest of your night.
Schwartz and Holtzman said they got something cooking. $104 million is not enough. So goodness knows there's plenty of source material.